Good afternoon, everybody. I realize I stand between you and lunch, so I'll try to be very quick and concise. Thank you for having me here. It's a great pleasure to be talking to you about blockchain and making it real. I've been honored to have been a part of this journey for 3 years with IBM, and it's exciting to see it push past its hype cycle better than we had predicted and start to become real. But before, I shouldn't do this to you, it's torturous, but before we talk about blockchain, let's take a moment and talk about food.
The journey of food from its origins to our plate is all about transformation. Food is constantly changing, and everything that we do to it makes that change accelerate. Things are ripening, things are deteriorating, microbial populations are rising and falling, which begs the question, how well do we know our food?
With everything available at our fingertips, consumers want to know where their product's coming from.
Where it originated from, how was it produced, if it's organic, is it sustainably grown?
The consumer expects to be able to trust their food. It's what we build our company on. It's how we thrive in the industry.
And when it comes to food safety and traceability and resolving outbreaks, you have to be fast and you have to be right.
If you lose trust in something that important, the entire industry suffers. They think it's all lettuce, it's all tomatoes.
It's very frustrating to be part of a supply chain where you have to pull large quantities of product, but it's the right thing to do because you want people to be safe. The bottom line of technology today in the food space is that it enables us to have a visibility and a trust level that was unaccomplishable previously.
What makes me the most proud of what I do is being able to be a part of something that's bigger than me, knowing that everything that we're sending out there is safe.
That's what technology is supposed to be doing, is giving us these tools to make our lives easier, better, and safer.
For the first time in our history, we have the power to know everything about our food. So let's see what that power can do.
For the first time in history, we have the ability and the power to know more about our food. We have the ability to know how fresh it is. We have the ability to know if it was contaminated or not. 600 million people will suffer from a foodborne illness. 420,000 will die from it, and 30% of those would be children. When we have a problem of that magnitude staring us in our faces, how can we not try to solve it? And what is the problem? You heard them say that when they detect contamination, it can take them up to weeks to figure out the contaminated food. It can take them up to weeks to figure out where in the supply chain that contaminated food was. It can take them up to weeks to exactly nail down the locations. And then they have to do a massive pull. It's all spinach. It's not just that contaminated spinach. The problem is that we live in a world where we have brokers and most connections are point-to-point. That means we live in a system where we don't trust each other, and I only know a person ahead of me and a person behind me, right? What if we were to disintermediate the intermediaries? What if we could create a system where everybody had the same version of truth? What if the system had inherent properties like immutability, managed transparency, and auditability? When we have a system where everybody can see one version of the truth and can only see what they're required to see, we can start to really turn things on their head. Things that we've been used to doing the old way because that was the only way we could. So we like to say that at IBM, with blockchain, we are building an operating system of trust. When we really start talking about trust, it turns things on its head. It's no longer a conversation about technology. It's no longer a conversation about ICOs. It's no longer a conversation about tokenization. The conversation is, let's get in a room together and talk on things that we can do. So to give you a few quick examples, I'll cover IBM TradeLens and IBM WorldWire. TradeLens Global trade is a $160 trillion business. 80% of what we use in our daily life, it's probably different for Bali, has been shipped to us. Trade suffers from inherent deficiencies. The untapped potential in trade is approximately 25%. So we set out on a journey to optimize that. We said, if we can better track containers, if we can better track trade documents, what can we do? And it's a funny story. I love avocados. America loves avocados. A container of avocados is valued at $4 million, and pack it too late, it's all gone. We spend more money sometimes shipping the documents of a container across than the container itself. So we set out with a goal of optimizing trade. And we said if we tap into these inefficiencies, we can make it better. Internally, when we had kicked out this project, it was called Global Trade Digitization. Because when we started having a conversation, it wasn't about blockchain. It was about how do we solve this problem. And when we looked at the problem, the first problem we needed to solve was digitization. The concept of money is 2,000 years old. We've been using the same financial systems that we built 50 years ago. Somebody mentioned earlier on the panel that any transaction, across countries can take up to 5 to 7 days. I recently relocated from the US to Singapore. I can promise you it takes longer. So we set out on a path of making rails for payment systems where we can settle transactions in near real time. And that's the IBM Worldwide project that we're working on. An IBM Business Value study found that 66% of the organizations that are playing with blockchain are actually looking at new business models. We've said, yes, blockchain will help us reduce cost, it'll help us reduce time, it'll help us reduce risk, it'll make the processes more efficient and better. But it's more than that. When you turn the problem on its head and you said, now we've really built an operating system of trust, we begin to see that there are new business models that arise, no matter where you sit in the ecosystem, right? We've, over the past 2.5, 3 years while we've been on our journey to blockchain, we've worked across a wide variety of projects, across a wide variety of customers, projects we had not envisioned when we first started having those conversations. We found one thing in common across all these projects. Blockchain is a team sport, right? And when we start to talk about creating these networks, these permission networks, we really need to start thinking about governance of these networks. We need a fabric or an operating system of trust that can enforce these rules of governance digitally. We talked a lot about tokenization today. The ICO market broke a $104 billion barrier globally. IBM's not in the business of doing ICOs, but we're seeing a lot of growth in the tokenization of assets market, whether it's fungible or non-fungible assets. Can it help us reach the unbanked? Can it help us digitize precious metals? Can it help us digitize real estate? We've been working with Plastic Bank. We, as a humanity, drive a truck full of plastic into our oceans every single minute of every single day. 80% of that plastic comes from poor countries. Plastic Bank is working on the idea of keeping that plastic out of the oceans. The way they want to keep plastic out of the oceans is by incentivizing the community to collect plastic, to recycle it, to return it. And then, usually in these poor countries, it's dangerous to carry cash around. So they, in turn, pay these people who are collecting plastic in tokens. And they can use these tokens to buy talk time on their phone, pay their kids' tuition, or buy their groceries. So really creating an ecosystem where we're helping the environment. We're working with Viridium Labs on the concept of digitizing carbon credits and working with Stellar to create a marketplace for trading these carbon credits. Now, what we've essentially done is we've made it super easy for companies to calculate their carbon footprint and hopefully start to optimize it. We're working with 150-year-old companies, 100-year-old companies on digitizing precious metals. When we start to look at the process of tokenization, whether it's a utility token or an asset-backed token, the use cases are tremendous, right? But when we look at it, there are hard research problems to be solved as we try to build out these systems, right? Over the past 3 years, we've seen several organizations, several companies, startups, as well as established enterprises move on to their blockchain journey. Quite a few, all of them started with a conversation. All of them said, let's get in a room together. Here's a problem that hasn't been solved for a long time. Let's try to solve it. So we start or create a network, we accelerate it, and then we innovate on top of it. So that's what we've seen unfold with more than 400 plus projects that we've done. We're part of the Hyperledger project because when we started this journey, we wanted to work in the open with the Linux Foundation. We believed that our enterprise customers needed the notion of a permission blockchain for business. We wanted a way to be able to govern these networks. So the concept of governance was really important to us. And that's what Hyperledger offers us. We have more than 500 plus engineers. We have more than 250 companies as part of the Hyperledger project. And under Hyperledger, there are multiple projects. Fabric 1, which is core blockchain technology. And then we are now have multiple projects on interoperability across different kinds of blockchain protocols. We are starting to see, so we've seen networks, we've worked on projects across POCs, pilots, and moving into productions. And now we're starting to see network of networks emerge, right? If you look at it, the trade finance, the trade logistics, and the industry trade network are beginning to converge together. That's just an example. The transact or tokenize your assets, but really only allow people who have been KYC'd to sell it, is bringing the KYC network and the tokens network together. So the more we get into this, at this point, 2018, we are starting to see the beginning of networks come together. And what does it mean from a business perspective for all these to come together? And what does it mean for us from a technology perspective that these come together? If I was to capture this in a nutshell, how do you make blockchain ventures successful? You have to have the business expertise. We will run into lots of people who use the word blockchain too loosely. Blockchain is not a hammer, and every problem that we see in the world is not a nail. You really need technically strong experts to say, this is a good use case where we need immutability, we need auditability, we need people to have the same version of truth, we need to be serious about privacy. And that's a good use case for blockchain. And you really need strong technical skills to be able to deliver on those. It has to be open and secure and scalable, right? And we have to create an ecosystem that will drive innovation. And open is the only way to go because I strongly believe that's the only way we foster innovation. I've had several conversations in blockchain during my journey through this, whether it was with the ziplining guide or whether it was with a Grammy award-winning musician friend of mine. Everybody has a unique perspective, but I think everybody has a hope that blockchain will allow us to start having conversations that will enable us to solve problems that we've never solved before. So I just leave you with that. Thank you for the opportunity, and I'm happy to answer questions if you have any later on. Thank you.
Audio Jungle.